The Atlantic is lead gray and close, the sky pressed down to a low lid, sleet knitting air to sea in torn veils, visibility collapsing to 2 cables, then opening to 4 between squalls. The destroyer's bow lifts and falls against Beaufort 5Cs, slamming held in check to keep frames intact, speed held to 12 knots by order of the bridge. Voice pipes rattle as the helmsman steadies on the only bearing that matters. At the forward tubes, hands in stiff gloves fight frozen lanyards and rime on the doors, white glaze discoloring painted steel, breath fogging in short, hard bursts that smell of cordite and cold grease. Ahead, low in the trough, a periscope wake stitches a thin curl through gray, vanishes, returns. The enemy is up and daring, not deep yet. The convoy's next zig is due in 7 minutes. If the U-boat rides that change, it will have a door. If they chase and miss, the door will be theirs to answer. Lieutenant James Hart leans into a bridge window frame, sleet needling his cheek through a cracked swing-arm pane, his eyes fixed on where the U-boat should be rather than where the sea insists it is. The numbers are right. Tubes trained, gyro set for an 800-yard crossing shot, stopwatch warm in his glove. He believes in diagrams brought from gunnery school, the clean 90-degree world of instructional reels. He calls it through wind and wire, voice drilled flat to cut noise, thrill disguised as monotone because tone doesn't sink or save ships. Fire 1. Down on the forecastle, slick with ice and spray, the lanyard jerks, a clamp flares, compressed air thunders into the tube and overwhelms the gale for a heartbeat. The torpedo jumps and clears, its wake the only white certainty on a surface that has forgotten what shape means. A line of churn that promises arithmetic realized. Hart thumbs the watch and reads times to the second, helm correcting 1 point starboard to hold the predicted intercept, a knife laid parallel to a moving belly. He can almost see the outline under spray, as if certainty can conjure steel from water, and he holds his breath without knowing it. In the ASDIC hut, Chief Petty Officer Elsie Moran listens to a world nobody else hears, one hand cupped on Bakelite phones, one gloved finger on the range wheel, pencil ticking a strip of plotting paper under a hooded lamp. Type 144 pings fan out in a 15-degree beam. Each second is a question launched into cold iron ink. The return comes back stuttered by sea state, spikes of clutter when the bow lifts, valleys when the ship falls. She trims gain, narrows the beam. There it is, a thin thread shifting right, then left, then right again, in tiny angles that mean intent, not drift. Bearing 037, closing, angle on bow shallow, less than 30. A scar inside her lip from a scald long-heeled, twinges. Machines are precise until the ocean says otherwise. Oberleutnant Karl Brenner watches his own wake through a lens beaded with sleet, periscope head chipping droplets as it cuts a barely visible seam. He lingers longer than doctrine because the convoy's rhythm is a book he likes. 7 minutes this way, 9 the other, a zig plan that can be felt. Guns on the destroyer turn like slow eyes. He holds under the surface layer, riding the slight cushion of a thermocline he cannot see, the cruel cold thickening oil in his pistols and making every moving part feel old. He turns into the threat to narrow his profile, make their shot worse, and his chances better later tonight. Instincts have kept him from being a brass plate on a pier. He lets them lead. Torpedo wake and U-boat track converge on a place Brenner is about to leave. Intentions are seconds out of date as they're spoken. Hart's stopwatch ticks to impact. The helmsman's fingers whiten on a wheel that fights the sea like a living thing. A white boil as big as a car door, a flicker of expectation, and then a flat, heartbreaking thud against steel that ripples through water and hull into the bones of every man aboard. No plume, no white column, no orange bloom. Just a dull clang like a door closing on a corridor Hart thought open forever, and the seconds he spent shaping perfection become an irreversible waste. On the sloop astern port abaft the Convoy's center, le returns camdre. Alan Reeves jerks at the thud, attention torn for a heartbeat from a cluster of hulking freighters he must keep shepherded. His world is calmed chaos, penciled tracks blotched with sleet, a windscreen smeared with brine, a pad listing stores, depth charges down by a third, torpedoes counted like coins. Admiralty doctrine keeps geometry taut around fragile steel. He lifts an Aldis and flashes a quick query to the destroyer, knowing radio silence will keep any real talk confined to flags and trust. His eyes go to the Convoy's lead, where a Commodore's canvas square will blink the scheduled zig. The gap he fears is about to open. Hart rejects the thud because he cannot accept its meaning. Miscount, he snaps. Too quick, too late. We were early by 2 seconds, long by 1. Sea distortion, wrong angle. He spits drill words to fight humiliation. The detonator's tuned for 90. He saw near right angle, didn't he? The destroyer's bow, rising wrong, cheated his eye. His glove leaves a smear on the window where he tries to will the explosion out of the gray. Beyond the glass, sleet rattles. The periscope track slides left, then down, then nothing. The second fish is a want that will not make time slow. Moran's pencil point breaks. She grabs another without looking. The trace goes thin, then fat as a wave lifts, and the beam spreads. She compensates, waiting for the next clean strike. The U-boat is turning into them, angle on bow reducing, a deliberate denial of the geometry Hart needs. In her head, cream stock stamped with crown and months-old date, an Admiralty circular no one had time to read twice. At less than 30 degrees obliquity, certain pistols can skate. Pins strike like a skater's toe and glance without fire, especially in cold that thickens grease. She hears it again like a whisper. Warm the detonator or bring the angle. Honest. Up here, you can do only one. Brenner feels the thud through the periscope column and through his feet. The boat informs his nerves. His nerves inform choices. For a single pulse, his breath snags. Others felt this and were not here to feel anything after. No bloom, no shock, no tearing roar. He blinks water from the lens, grabs the planes, voice level, but fast, the acceleration men use when their bodies already know the order. Dive, hard, into their wake where their sound cloaks ours. If their ASDIC is as timid as winter has trained it, they'll lose us under the first temperature break. He readies bold not because he believes in it, but because habits hold a boat together while a captain bets lives in seconds. Reeves tastes metal, swallow of a shout he will not spend. The convoy he can feel behind him, sway of freighter tails, throb of slow engines, fighting seas built to be endured, not fought. And the U-boat's intention like a handlight on his shoulder. The signal to maintain screen goes up because obligations don't stop at one predator. A wolfpack isn't present, but fear of it makes a fleet out of rumor. He watches the destroyer's bow, half a point only, not fully committed, and starts calculating how many seconds it takes for a doorway to open wide enough that any torpedo would find it. Hart leans over the rails as if angle can cure physics, throat tight with humiliation he won't name. He wants the second torpedo now, but forward tubes are shuddering with ice and seams. Men will need minutes he doesn't have. Reload, now! He knifes down the voice pipe, and the acknowledgement comes flat, without apology. 6 to 8 in this weather, sir. His world shrinks to a falling stopwatch hand. The other path makes itself the depth charges he half scorned this morning, and now he says them clean. Turn into the last known track, follow with a pattern if Moran holds contact, hope the net can atone for a weapon that promised and failed. In the hut, Moran's voice stays steady because steadiness saves. The contact drops out 2 seconds as the bow falls. Sea State lifts the sound off target and back like a flicked switch. Then the return again, skewed, bearing now 045, speed-notched, line veering under their stern textbook, and terrifying. Decoys can cough chemical bubbles and paint false positives like will-o-wisps, but this is not that. This is steel with intent, changing depth. She trims the beam narrower than comfort, knowing she will be blind to flanks, and she stakes her sanity on what the ear knows. Brenner slides under the destroyer's wake. Near-surface churn will scramble clean ASDIC cones. He orders depth to 50, then 60, not to stay, but to cross turbulence with a shiver that ruins patterns. He keeps bold anyway. He doesn't expect fools across the beam. He expects stubbornness. The compass card ticks 2 degrees. He plans to ride the backside of their run and put himself where daylight doctrine says no captain will be. Under their noses, then away toward the convoy's new course if it changes on schedule. He wants night and the long geometry of black water more than he fears their drums. Heart hovers hand over engine telegraph. Speed is life and liability, both. At 18 knots they can put charges down quick enough to bracket, but slamming may open seams they have no dock to mend. 12 keeps the ship whole, keeps the screen coherent, keeps the convoy from shearing into wrong headings. He looks left to Reeves's sloop for permission his pride doesn't want to ask. The Aldis knife blinks. Maintain screen. It reads as plea and command. He grinds his teeth and points the ship into the last honest bearing he has. Spray comes off the bow in sheets. The sky stays low, and the world is only gray and numbers. Moran turns gain down again. The return is below them and receding, and the temptation is to turn up until only noise is left. She marks angle on bow on the greasy chart corner, 20 degrees, perhaps less, and the jolt that follows is not fear, but clarity. If they put another fish into that hull at that graze, they will get the same tender thud and the same sick nothing. The circular in her head says it without apology. Impact pistols need an honest strike. Cold slows the striker. Myths don't explode ships. She wants to shout it onto the bridge. Rank keeps her mouth flat. Reeves glances to the convoy's forward line. A Commodore's canvas blinks deliberate haste in sleet. A 10-degree turn in 1 minute to avoid a patch of wireless ghosts his HFDF man claims smells of wolfpack. That change will tear at his scaffold. If the destroyer follows her contact, the gap will widen into an invitation. Depth charges left. Not enough to waste. Doctrine says preserve for dark when eyes go blind. He grips the voice pipe, shouts above the thrum, holds station unless sure, and knows sure is a luxury he cannot buy here. Brenner feels depth increase, pressure change, forward bulkhead rivets ping like cooling stoves. Inclinometer swings, then settles. Stern rises, bow dips. Machinery spins because a weapon aimed at him did not. He lingers longer than he should because he wants one more look at their course and speed, wants to see if the destroyer commits, or if fear of leaving its flock holds it enticingly still. He risk-sweeps the scope for 2 seconds. Destroyer angled down their wake, sloop turning to fill the convoy's wobble, the chessboard sliding right in anticipation of an invisible threat he will make solid if he gets his dark. On the quarterdeck, a petty officer with a stub pencil writes what he shouldn't, angle on bow 20 the grern, rejects shot, glares at his own presumption, tears the page and pockets the thought. He won't tell Hart. Authority is part of keeping hands obedient. He slaps a gloved palm onto a depth charge pistol and clicks to 150, 200, 250, a staggered net because thermoclines hide boats like second oceans. Hart hears the word reject without a scrap of paper to carry it. He hates it. He orders a pattern anyway, bile high in his throat, and tells himself he'll take one more fish as soon as forward gear stops being a refrigerator. He looks to Moran for the confirmation that will make the pivot feel like attack, not retreat. Seconds taunt as ASDIC returns go thin and clean. He pictures a second pass, slower, closer, angled to give the pistol the 90 it begged for, and sees the risk. If wrong, the U-boat will slip, rearm, and fire back into the convoy while he stares at empty water. Her jaw unclenches because the contact holds when it shouldn't. If this were bold, the line doesn't pop and vanish the way chemical bubbles sigh away. She wants to say the weapon failed them because winter sat in its springs. She wants to say it won't be wicked to reject the second. She swallows doctrine and says only what she owns, bearing and range and angle. Shallowing, turning toward us. The whisper carries a fact, not permission. Reeves writes one word for his Aldis man: wait. Patience is absurd when men are cutting seconds into decisions, feeding them to cold machines. Waiting has saved ships more than bravery. The convoy starts its 10-degree swing, a herd shifting shoulder into wind. The starboard water goes suddenly empty. Wolves love emptiness. The back of his neck reads 3 submarines where there may be 1. By dark, it will be 5. He drifts toward the gap as if trimming for weather, without admitting he's drifting at all. The sea smacks the destroyer's bow as Hart starts the run-in. The ship shudders, ASDIC trace skips, returns fade and swell like a stressed heart. The helmsman curses and corrects. For a second, they are blind, then not. In that stammer, Brenner slides deeper, angling under the turbulence the destroyer lays above him. Everything they do to find him makes his trick easier for a breath. Hart feels the truth of that with the dislike of a man who sees a problem in a mirror. Sleet needles harder, pinging off metal and skin. On the foredeck, the torpedo crew wrench at frozen pins that don't care about seconds or intentions. One man tries a glove off for grip, yelps, jams it back, cold burn sensation to a howl. The clock in Hart's hand is the only thing moving fast, and it isn't tied to anything below where the boat goes dark. Minutes become currency they spend before they have it. Under gray, Brenner's men brace inside a trembling cylinder, bulbs swinging on cords and throwing dizzy circles over faces slick with sweat that shouldn't exist at this temperature, but does because fear is hot. Rivets ping like hail. The forward room smells of oil and men and faint cheap paint. Gloating is a luxury, and luxuries are things you lose. He counts to get below where hurried charges set. Shallow won't find them. Moran finds her voice when the map in her head lines with a view only she gets, bearing to drive them into the wake. She adds what burns her tongue, angle on bow shallow and getting shallower. Any second fish will skate. Nobody asked her for weapons counsel. Wrong metal on her collar for that. She says the taboo anyway. Slow to steepen angle or pattern now. She steps outside doctrine because the memo that said what it said never made a click on the bridge. Reeves watches the destroyer start to commit, and the sea immediately mock the resolve. He wants to tell them about shallow angles, winter-thick grease, and weapons as liars when asked to work in conditions they weren't born to. Radios stayed dark. He trusts the men to read what he read and then burn the book if they must. Hart hears it, hates the messenger, knows the truth. His attention splits, half still craving the second torpedo to redeem him, half swinging to a pattern that can turn certainty into water's language. He stays with the run-in, one decision better than 2 half-decisions, and promises himself the fix for pistols and pins belongs to workshops and letters, not this deck. The last of the visible wake crumples as the periscope goes down. The destroyer plows through where the enemy was, not where he is. Moran's trace shows the line curling under and away into a cold layer where sound bends and patience breaks. The convoy to starboard begins its turn, new angles and silhouettes like a slow parade rearranging in sleet. The screen gapes. Hart orders the pattern prepared, brass pistols clicked with mittened hands. The low hum of a decision becomes a chase. The first charge rolls, locks, and falls. Brenner is already nose down beneath them, gambling that wake chaos will cloak 1 second more. Water between the destroyer's stern and the convoy's trailing freighters isn't just water now. It's risk growing with every yard. The thud that should have been an explosion still hums. Everyone shares the same theater. Hart, Moran, Reeves, Brenner, weather, metal, memos. Nobody will admit they knew. The U-boat takes a hard dive under their wake, while the convoy opens a gap to starboard that looks, to any trained eye, like a door. Reeves watches that door like a fire break along dry heather. The Commodore's lamp blinks, maintains screen, and his signalman repeats into gray as if repetition can nail the gap shut. He lifts the voice pipe. "Hart, hold 10 degrees off. Herd them back into bracket." Doctrine is clear. His eyes hate it. Finish the kill or guard the flock. He keeps the sloop at 18 knots, highest he dares. The bow lifts to snap. He drifts nearer the gap without saying so. If Hart slows, he'll shoulder it. Spray scours the destroyer's windows in fan-shaped smears. The helmsman mutters compass courses, knuckles white. Moran narrows the ASDIC beam to 15 degrees, lighthouse sweep through confusion. Sea State lifts false floors, thermoclines move like ghost decks, her trace skitters before penciling into a thin, clean line that isn't water. Bearing 270, opening, depth unclear. She thumbs range back to 1,600 yards, ignores hiss, the wrong color, and whispers into the phone, "Angle shallow." Her voice hits the bridge tin-scraped and sounds like doubt. That frightens her more than depth. Hart moves before the words finish crawling from the pipe. Half down the starboard ladder, he's on the tube crew, faces raw, breath steaming. "Worm her," he snaps, meaning the detonator. But the forward doors are rimmed white. The capstan squeals on frozen thread. Icing takes minutes that cannot be summoned. Above, sleet stings like grit. Beneath, a shadow under their keel. Brenner flattens angle with a petty calculation learned in calmer seas. Make the attacker's target slimmer. His periscope peaks, a silver nail through gray cloth. "Octane," he breathes, counting blade flicker, and orders bold ready. He thinks of the torpedo's kiss, felt through the boat like a fist. He doesn't know the pin skated, he only knows Providence visited without him, and won't again. He slides planes down anyway, buying invisibility at the price of pressure, singing along seams. Moran sees the line lean, then can't wrong in a familiar way. Seas lift the bow, beam tilt scrubs the contact like chalk on rough slate. She clicks a filter, draws the cone tighter, willfully blind to flanks. A contact last month died in a thermocline when she was too proud to narrow. She writes the number anyway. AOB 20 degree, underlines twice, wants to slap it against the bridge glass. The forward line steadies. Hart is about to commit. She knows the second fish, even if thawed by breath, is still physics in sleet. Reeves watches the Commodore's lamp blink a four-letter plea. Anything but leave your station. Zigs and legs are equations of hope and paranoia. The turn ripples. Fat ships heel. The hole yawns. He can't radio sense into the air. He decides memory will carry. At steep angle, your impact pistol is a saint. At shallow, it's a drunk. He orders stern patterns set deep. Ladders always beat the cunning of a single depth. He trims rudder a point starboard to slide into the hole without declaring it. Hart feels the tube door give like a pulled tooth, but delay is a knife. A loader's hands are red and burned. Someone holds the pistol between coats, sharing breath with metal. Specifications promised. Striker travel in fractions. Detonation reliable at 90. Ink never met sleet. He glances to the bridge where gray is all there is. "Stand by." The words vanish into wind. Below, bold hisses out. Bubbles bloom backward. A curtain drawn over a stage watched with wrong eyes. Moran's trace splits. True line thins. Phantom blossoms bright at shallow depth. She has seen bold only in rumor and heard it only once. The tenor of true steel is different. Chemical mischief, is a breathy lie. "Ignore," she says, and betrays a textbook without apology. If she's wrong, they waste charges and go naked. Reeves calculates loads awake and asleep. Pistols to 100, 150, 250 in a ladder. Beads on a rosary. He signals a corvette to port wing by flag to plug the gap if the destroyer slows, hoping the message is specific enough in this weather. The rail bites his glove. The sloop shudders. A midshipman draws angles that look like a boy's handwriting. "Suspect decoys," he says, and the boy writes it as if waiting will not be punished by the sea. Hart tries to think like a weapon. U-boat turned into them. AOB 20, maybe less. A skate along rivets. A detonator like a finger slipping. He curses quietly. His first perfect proof became a failure he cannot repair. "Second fish nearly ready," he calls up. The answer is an absence. Reeves's steadiness, not a voice, but a presence across white tops. Hold. Torpedoes are economy. Depth charges are for hurting, not homicide. But doctrine never heard a dead thud in 9-degree water. The destroyer noses into a turn. The helmsman matches roll to swell, every motion trading bow from burying, stern from skidding. They can't run more than 18 knots without risking the bow. Every extra knot is rotten wood. Hart wants speed. Moran wants angle. "Tell them to slow, close, make him fill the beam," she whispers. The operator looks at rules, then at her face, and lifts the mouthpiece that suddenly weighs a stone. Brenner settles into his dive, hull groan turning from complaint to song. He pictures the destroyer fighting ice and pride. He orders small rudder to keep angles shallow, keep strikes sliding, depth to 150, a guess better than hope. The engineer smears a thumb on a gland, tastes salt because eyes lie when bulbs swing. Moran's memory cuts to a door marked "Confidential," a talk she overheard about springs and striker travel tuned in calm Portsmouth baths. She had smelled paper salt and tobacco and read less than 30 degrees, pins skate, cold thickens grease, impact is shy unless struck true. She isn't supposed to carry it to sea, but it sits on her shoulder now as rain. Reject the shot unless he crosses, she manages, not to be liked, but to be heard. Reeves feels the clock pull. The convoy's turn drags heavy sterns through swell. A tramp's lamp winks nervously. He can't answer curiosity. He can choose life or death. Wireless silence keeps enemy ears deaf and his own half blind. "We won't spend a second fish on 20 degrees, he tells no one and everyone. Decision is a secret one ship over. On deck, the second warhead seats with a click like a lock. The loader stares at Hart with red-rimmed hope. Hart could say yes and be understood by his men in a word. He stares at gray and sleet. The first fish struck and did nothing. A second will run the same geometry unless he forces geometry to change. If they close, they invite a shot. If they slow, they sit on a plate. If they hold, they lose. He opens his mouth to choose speed because speed forgives almost anything, and then hears Moran clearly. "Angle 20. At this angle, impact won't go. Change the approach. Pattern deep or force 90. Torpedo unreliable." The helmsman lets a vowel escape. Hart turns with a look that could freeze fresh water. She refuses the look. She adjusts gain. The true target edges under their belly. The decoy smears, swells, and pops away. She stabs her earlier note. Rejects shot, underlines until the paper tears. The weather argues. A starboard slap and the destroyer shivers. A shin clips metal. Pain snaps breath. Hart imagines 18 knots and a last swing to force a crossing strike, the warhead knifing in steep. He imagines a staggered pattern at 100, 150, 250. Pistols clicked while the stern lifts and drums drop. Both pictures are present tense. One will get men killed if wrong. Reeves reads a brief lamp from the destroyer, angle shallow, reject, and finds he is not the man who will cling to a circular for comfort, but he is the man who will use it to save ships. He phones aft, pistols 150 across the middle, 250 in bracket. Rudder a point starboard to counter the convoy's last zig, nose into the gap. He cannot order Hart by lamp to do what Admiralty hasn't blessed. He can make space for the destroyer to slow and not die. Brenner's interior is a library of tremors. Rivets ping, men expect the sea for the next syllable. The hydrophone man puts his hand to the bulkhead and feels the prop note slow, pattern falling out of doctrine. "They're easing," he says. Brenner trusts a human ear half a degree. He angles to slide under the attacker's belly, close, risky, snug as a rat, through a syllable. A faithful hound of a torpedo waits, breath fogging. Hart raises his hand and drops it. No. He hates it and does it. "Pattern able," he calls aft. "Middle 150, bracket 250, throwers 100. The coxswain repeats like reading a wall of names. Brass clicks under cold wood. A scar on a thumb goes white against metal. The men on the rails move like gamblers who already lost and will throw anyway. Freighters hunch and sway, black bows pushing gray water, signal lamps winking Morse eyes. The zig ripples. The convoy shape is temporal again, a line of gulls startled into a curve. The gap is offset, never really closed in a moving sea. Reeves noses into it like a finger plugging a lung wound and tells himself he is changing punctuation, not doctrine. He counts what's left. He lies about how enough is enough. Moran leans with the roll, forehead clear of glass so the scope doesn't bruise. The line is clean again, free of the decoy smear. Bearing 276, range 1200. Closing, she says, and adds what she must not. Angle improves if we slow. The bridge answers with silence that feels like assent. The order comes. Engines, easy. The bow settles. Slap eases. New risk enters. Less speed means a truer German shot if one is in a tube. Less speed makes depth charge flowers honest. The second fish waits unjudging. Brenner hears the prop note slow and smiles like someone told a good joke. They mean to straddle him. He orders down 5 meters, then up, then down. Ruin ladders with a sinus. He hopes they have few charges. He hopes their pistols are lazy. He fears a crew that can calibrate in sleet. The decoy bubbles cough, then die. Moran notes it without pleasure. The real line matters. Proof in water is colder than proof in air. She lifts the phone again and chooses where to put their stern. Hart's fingers leave the tube cradle and close on the depth charge lever, edges nicked and smoothed by other hands. The deck under his boots is a lung, expanding against the sea. He opens his mouth to posture the stern to the mark Moran sings. Off starboard a freighter bleats a whistle. Barnyard small, full of fear. The choice tastes of iron. Reeves creases the gap, hazard lights doused, guns black in sleet, faces wet and hard. He waits for Hart's commit, second fish and risk a second thud, or swing and lay a pattern slow and exact. If he takes pattern, we'll cross astern and box, he tells a midshipman, who nods as if boxes work on fish with lungs. He doesn't believe in boxes. He believes in timing. The stern swings into wind, rails shine with a skin of ice. Pistols are clicked, numbers shouted twice out of superstition. Men hold handles with blank attention. Moran's voice comes up the pipe, tight as wire. At this angle it won't go. Change the attack, or we lose her. The bridge goes quiet but for sleet on glass and hull groan. Reeves weighs time against doctrine. The convoy is already sheering to starboard under its 7-minute legs, geometry sliding apart. If they hold, rumor stays rumor. If they prosecute, they rip a hole and invite a different torpedo. Engineering reports 18 knots is the ceiling unless they want to break the bow. The seconds are gone. Moran's knuckles whiten on the training wheel as if grip can steady a beam against white horses, lifting and slamming the prow. The hairline slides across the grid like it's choosing which destroyer to spite, then cleans. The U-boat has taken periscope depth's knife edge and is angling, not away. In her head the circular whispers again. Warm a pistol in your hands? Impossible. Warm the angle. 1150, slipping, AOB 20, she says, and the recorder's pencil clicks. Hart fights ice on the forward doors while breath plumes like steam off a locomotive. He wants the textbook answer. Reload, recalc, fire 2, trust 30, can do in a pinch. A petty officer says 6 to 8 minutes if things go right. Nothing is. White crust stipples every hinge. The periscope blinks far down their starboard aft. Wrong place, wrong time. Brenner is narrowing his beam, making any impact a slide, and setting his own knife to their flank if they snatch at the wrong splash. In the U-boat, bulbs swing and ping a rhythm out of the rivets. The soundman calls depth charge wash a moment after everyone feels it. Brenner calculates an escort leader's heart. Go fast and make noise, or slow and become target shape. He orders the periscope lowered because seeing kills patience. Daylight demands a nerve he saves for night. Reeves bets Convoy on physics, not slogans. Reduced to 8, stern pattern, 150-250, he says. It cuts Hart's teeth. It admits torpedoes can't be trusted here. The signalman flashes to the Commodore, a crisp, unsigned, maintaining by prosecution. On the fantail, deckhands move between rails, brass pistols set, staggered depths, aim to catch rash, sure, stubborn. The wind takes half a word, and Moran repeats it so the men hear certainty is carried, not born. A sleet curtain sweeps. Horizon is a guess. The bow settles. ASDIC firms. The hairline angles under their wake, a faint curl of periscope, wake stitches gray. Brenner is pressing luck. He's inside their head, forcing them to rush and misangle, or slow and open the gap. Bold pops to starboard, an oval return at shallow depth. Moran ignores it and holds the deeper line. 125, 850. Closing slow, she says. The pen ticks. In Brenner's control room, pressure rings the steel. He orders a small turn into the destroyer's track, cheap show to narrow flank. Depth quivers around 50 meters. Air is wet with oil and breath. A helmsman coughs into his sleeve. A rivet ticks like a metronome. Bold smears a false skin above. Night hunts require knowledge. Knowledge requires sight. He hunts daylight like someone who owes the night a favor. Reeves and Moran twin. Hard a starboard, steady. The destroyer slides, screws bite, seawater plumes off the bow as she shapes to drop the stern square over the guest run, crossing like a T. Hart watches pins checked, flags red, cylinders heavy as men and full of promises. He can't shake the image of his torpedo's perfect kiss and dead thud. The second fish waits with door open and no invitation. He looks aft and stays with drums. The Convoy throws its 10-degree change. Freighter shapes heel and wobble. The hole they're cutting widens. Reeves calculates 10 minutes to close if they lose contact, 5 if they keep it and cut across. He can sense other escorts balancing doctrine and noise with dark ships moving like cattle. Confirm, he asks Moran, not for doubt, for anchor. Bear 127, 128, range 650, 630, slight dive, she says. At 8 knots, the picture is steel, not sea. She refuses to be shamed by the same water twice. The U-boat is narrowing AOB to less than 30. She writes angle on bow 20 degree, reject shot and stares at it, sacrilege that saves. Hart reads it sideways and looks sick, then human. Brenner orders a fractional rise for one last look. The periscope breaks the surface. The destroyer's stern looms, black plates cresting, charges fat on rails, directly over his intended path. He dives hard, 5 down, then 10. The boat noses into a denser layer. "Thermocline," the navigator says. "Good cover if they can hide." Rivets ping, a light swings and dies. On deck, the chief gunner thumbs a safety, calls time, and the first cylinder thunks off. Another. 2 more from K-gun's arc, slap, vanish. Lanes staggered, 100, 200, 250, fuses ticking in brass skin as they fall. They know the sound, belly-thumping shove, shock-punching hull like a barge. They brace. Reeves counts seconds by habit, 3, 4. The sink rate, a rule of thumb, 6 feet per second, pressure waves quicker than regret. He's bet his ring on a slow approach that trades speed for angle and torpedoes for brute force. The deck whispers engine heartbeat through his boots. He can't look away. Moran holds the beam. The line goes fuzzy, breaks, multiplies, shock fronts ringing the water. She loses Brenner for a heartbeat, then catches a deeper flicker, a short, fast move that says, "Panic." The decoy blossoms stronger as its cloud swells, a false hull at 30 feet. It tempts her. She keeps the deeper flicker. A real boat's motion has a shape a decoy can't fake. The first charge goes. The ship flexes. Glass in the chart room rings a thin chime. Heart's teeth clack. Spray drifts pink under cloud as concussion kicks fish up in a white froth. Reeves watches Moran's face, not the water. Her spine will tell him if they're on. The second and third detonate deeper, a syncopation that would be music if numbers weren't written in shock and lungs. Below, hail. A pressure wave slaps the hull. Gaskets blink. A gauge needle twitches into red and back. Men press tongues to palate so they don't bite through. A bulb shatters black. Brenner orders a full port turn to throw off the ladder, then deeper. 250, where he hopes they haven't set. He dares because he has to. The boat creaks like an old door. The engineer smells something new and swears. "Deeper, 180, turning, accelerating," Moran calls. Doppler smear changes pitch. Screws bite more water. He's running. Joy and fear share the word. K-guns pop another pair. Settings tick higher. Calculations rewritten on sleet-damp cuffs. Hart's hands still. He's watching a battle he did not train for. He stares at the schematic, shy pins, thick grease, and feels anger with no face to strike. He tightens his glove and watches men make an angle, honest. Reeves scans flanks between detonations, eyes cutting to buffed-back silhouettes, the Commodore's zig continuing like a heartbeat. Beyond his sight could be a periscope, a tower, a coward. He fills the hole with geometry, not hope. By flag and drift, he asks another destroyer to cover without admitting the rip. Brenner's men shove back panic. Rust in his mouth, copper from his own bite. He smooths hair nobody sees. The boat rattles, further charges pound. He orders trim, orders patience like a valve. He knows the next thing wrong will be the last. He wants night and has gray. On the destroyer, cordite and sea mix in cold breath. Violence pauses. The last of the pattern falls. Moran leans into her instrument, proximity a myth that calms hands. The line deeper steadies. Hold and risk, losing him to a layer, or commit to his turn and drop the beam in that direction. "Port 5, hold 8, she calls. Reeves repeats as if saying makes true. The deck crew have the next set primed. Reeves hesitates, ear catching a change. Sleet softens, wind ticks a point. He looks aft out of superstition. The sea writes nothing. He gives the hand sign. The last charges roll with gravity's grudging grace. A deeper explosion. The U-boat hears it like weather, and then on them. Not a hit, but near enough to shake rivets into song. A pipe pencils a line of water on paint. Swearing in German is mostly the same when translated. Silence, trim. Patience, Brenner orders, as if virtue has a gauge. "Oil," Moran says. She will not say kill. The line degrades in a way she knows. Ballast tank burp, a cough. Probable damage. Her grin is small and brief. Target altering course, stern abeam now. She strains, leans. Sound is a rope under her fingers. Out of the corner of his eye, Hart sees it before numbers confirm. A brief needle breaks the sleet astern, periscope up and down in a guilty twitch where no scope should be if the U-boat is where they're killing. The ocean has jokes. Hart's throat claws a warning. The charges already in the air arc into a place the enemy just left. The first smacks the sea and vanishes, then 3, pistols at 150 and 200 tick into dark. For a breath there is only the stern wash slur and rail wires humming, then 4 dull-bellied heaves push them, gray domes rising and collapsing into hard rain. The destroyer rides the rebound with a hollow boom. Spray scours the windows. Elsie's phones go clean of anything but sea roar. A clean miss, snatched by a 2-second lag in a 3-dimensional race. She dials narrow, 15 degrees, fights clutter. Each plunge flattens signal, each rise lets it sing. A sliver threads in off the quarter at an oblique crawl, not tidy, not pretty, but true. Transient, ignore decoy, she says. The circular in her head unwinds once more. She hides it and speaks only what matters. Bearing port quarter, crossing. Reeves chooses to bring physics to the knife fight. 8 knots, crosses track, steepen the angle. He feels the screen tear wider and cannot do anything else. He signals a corvette by flag to sit on the starboard hole. He hears the commodity of brass clicking on pistols like coins. He spins. Hart and the helmsman swing the stern across the whisper. K guns bark 2, rails free 3. The second ladder falls. 40, 50, 60, Hart calls. Numbers stepping toward a 90, his whole morning begged for. He isn't chanting redemption, he's forcing geometry. The water under them bloats. A higher gut scream threads the concussion, tortured metal singing. Oil blooms ugly and honest, darker flecks in it, a smell like hot pennies and old fish. A lifebelt rolls up white, German letters. Deckhands flinch, look for permission to feel anything. Reeves gives nothing. Again, he says. Timing is not sympathetic. Brenner shoves a last instinct into the periscope, audacity or despair, seeking a bearing to pay for his men with another man's ship. He catches a black stern and white froth filling his small world. He saves nobody by seeing it. He orders a change he cannot live to complete. Depth squeals on the glass. Pressure takes the word and flattens it. Moran's line limps, then drops. Slow, uncontrolled. Descending uncontrolled, she says. Controlled dying can still sting. Uncontrolled may end before hate finds a target. She cannot let anyone relax. Stand by last, she adds. Her voice doesn't tremble. The last charges go with no rhetoric. Men execute without shouting. Detonations come with a thin, higher sound that will live in teeth. A second oil plume rises. Bits of rubber and enamel turn the water into ledger entries. The sea breathes out. The decoy pops once and vanishes. The phones grow quiet in a way she hates, silence that could mean gone or waiting. Sleet eases to mist. The convoy steadies on the leg. Lamps wink, relief coded as routine. Reeves lifts his lamp. We are back on the ring. The gap draws shut like a wound. He notes depth charges spent and the seam that burped a jet into his trousers. Fuel, he says. Ammunition. He feels night in his teeth. Hart leans on the tube housing and breathes like someone who's been under. He rehearses no speeches. He nods to the forward party and to Moran through a pipe. Pattern overshot, he says to no one, truth caught in a cold mouth. The second fish fogs in the cradle, unreal. The seam in the deck creaks under his boot. Brenner's boat exists now only as oil, black threads and a white ring, Things birds know. Somewhere below, pieces sink through cold layers. Up here, a screen closes, as if nothing broke. Down in the ASDIC hut, Moran hangs the phones on her collarbone and rubs her ears where cups bit. She writes on a damp page the unpoetic words the recorder wants. Between the lines, a doctrine shifted. Reeves takes the bridge from battle to shepherding, eyes on the zig plan, pencil cutting the next leg. He glances at the few remaining drums and what they'll mean if a second wolf shows before dark. He drops 2 degrees to slide the sloop back into the slot the destroyer left. Ahead, gray water flattens like a warning held back. Wind ticks left, mist strings to the railings. The destroyer eases back into station, torpedo doors rimed white and closed, rails wet, men quiet as drowned oxygen. The convoy's tail lifts and settles. On the bridge, Reeves says, "Hold 8. Watch the starboard quarter." On the next beat, Hart's hand goes to the telegraph and nudges ahead, eyes on gray, where a periscope might write its next sentence. The decision is simple and unpleasant. Return to station and live with what's spent, or hunt oil and open the ring. The ship lifts. Steele answers. The next choice is 3 cables away.